gem. Thus did I hear in one time that Bhagavan was dwelling on a massive Vajra mountain in Rajagriha together with a great community of monks and a great community of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Bhagavan was absorbed in the concentration on the categories of phenomena called profound perception. Also at that time, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara looked upon the very practice with a profound perfection of wisdom and beheld those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Then, through the power of Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said this to the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara: how should any son of the lineage train who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom? He said that, and the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara said this to the Venerable Shariputra: Shariputra, any son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom should look upon it like this, correctly and repeatedly beholding those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Form is empty, emptiness is form. Emptiness is not other than form. Form is also not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, discrimination, propositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, likewise, all phenomena are emptiness, without characteristic, unproduced, unseized, stainless, not without stain, not deficient, not fulfilled. Shariputra, therefore, in emptiness there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no compositional factors, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no mind, no visual form, no sound, no order, no taste, no object of touch, and no phenomenon. There is no I element, and so on up to including mind element, and no mental consciousness element. There is no ignorance, no extinction of ignorance, and so on up to and including no aging and death, and no extinction of aging and death. Similarly, there is no suffering, origination of suffering, cessation and path. There is no exalted wisdom and no attainment, and also no non-attainment. Shariputra. Therefore, because there is no attainment, bodhisattvas rely on and dwell in the perfection of wisdom. The mind, without obscuration, without fear, having completely passed beyond error, they reach the end point of nirvana. All the Buddhas who dwell in the three times also manifest the completely awakened to unsurpassable, perfect, complete enlightenment in reliance on the perfection of wisdom. Therefore, the mantra of the perfection of wisdom, the mantra of great knowledge, the unsurpassed mantra, the mantra equal to the unequal, the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering, should be known as truth, as since it is not false. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is declared: Tadyatha Gade Gade Paragate Parasamgate Bodhi Swaha. Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train in the profound perfection of wisdom like that. Then the Bhagavan also arose from that concentration and commended the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, saying, well said, son of the lineage, it is like that. It is like that. One should practice the perfection of wisdom. Just as you have indicated, even the Tathagata's rituals, the Bhagavan having thus spoken, the Venerable Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, those surrounding in their entirety, along with the world of gods, humans, asuras, the Gandharvas, were overjoyed and highly praised that spoken by the Bhagavan.
Basam Jimmy, Shira Barajam, I gave him a one on them all, so long as she doesn't get young Johnson. Tehada Gade Bara Sangate Buddhi Swaha. Tehada Gade Bara Sangate Buddhi Swaha. Tehada Gade Bara Sangate Buddhi Swaha. The verse of salutation from the Samayanankara. Adaya Beton number Gundan also this one, but in the changes and messages and making a Yunda chance. Agitated was on our Meva, Shava Meva, Dameva, Omeva, Romeva, Tate, Minton, Jimmy, Javani, Shishi, them, but so the Sanja Mana yet, Ambata, La Chance, Kangitus in yes on it, or Japan, Tambation, it ends a bit, Kodam de la Chance. 야, 다 산재의 최 그세야도 고도시는 시리 산재의 최의 컨디션에서나 내는 주디셔야 되고요. 아니 저와 차와매바당 다와 땡중 아주 산재의 최 컨디션에서 시야 되고요. 다 저와 차와매봤을 때야지 아니 Roller, Tuna, Shania Panda. Kedi Shana Panda, Motuna, and Shana never miss you. That the Jabatami was a teacher. Then Tawa Tenjung Sediadella, Tenjung Nisha, to dig Tenjung Jiksha. That the Nagutu Shigala Devche. Any danger, but nobody, any 10 大概点钟，然后10的这个点钟，10的这个印象，但是这个用的是那个到，对这个点钟，你写，当然的，这个草莓不是啊的，吃过呀，它中间的，那滚熟干那么的啥咯？ 좀 된데 공부했어야 되면 맞지. 저거 처음에 버쳐가 그 중진디 가렸을나? 랑 동네 미드바다 대원대 버리. 랑기 아니 미드베 동네데다 데베 디지디에 교도 깨는 되는 연구를. 가렸을나? 중재기 된중되기 다 가서 우리 그게 상단이 디 타네 아니 샤나 판다나 라라 디지 연구리 샤나 나바잖아 라라 동해 연구리 사기 다 저거 처음에 봤디 다 딘주부터네 조용도 대달 딘중기 중재기 딘중디 상단에 샤나 처음이지야 다 디기 아니 동해 숨쉬에 동해지 동해 초와 동해 텔레 다 텔레 기야디 소나마인 벨레스 샤나 나바샤나 소나마인 벨레리 디 데부디 낸주 날케니 동해지 동해가 소화식 자고 용돼야지 다 텔레 타르에 아니 문툴류데 다 두야지 어다 제니 어다 땡진 데버런 중에 균적이 땡중 상단에 샤나 차와미시야 샤나 차와도 아니 그저 도둑 샤나 판다 디관에 치마 문들 다된 문들 류된데야 대신 기부지 용야다 서로 치마 남수 이나야 문들 류된 톱토야지 다 디기 에네 가사디 우머지 차야나로 고불루 주기 아니 주저 문동엘이 니레스 송시야래 다 된적이다 먼저 주야지 땡진데버 중에 균적이 땡주도 상담이 먼저 주야지 다 되네 때는 주베 땡중세야 되기 koa lang ni tele ngeba nyi du sane ko de de ne zhuo yin du de me rang wang ge zhuo ji me ba re de me rang wang ge zhuo ji me ba yin du sane nga ran zo lo la nga rang ni da da ga ne xin ge ngai de be di ji da me de be du me da di du kang la de ne yo ya ge 아니 친한기 규진 디게디 탐절로 말한절로 그게 전쟁면에 주어진 아주로 샤용비야래 되네 주어 잠시로는 아주 쉬게요 말이 근데 이번 인도산에 되네 주에 땡중그 과야 올래 저러 상로 양양 다 제윤도 아니 신에 지 친한기 철了지 전쟁면에 주어도 낭신 나온다도 현배 아태근 좀버디 쇼쇼쇼 총조대지 타르다 딘딘데베니 다도 집에서버디 매버소돼야지 데이터는 내리 타르고 봐줘야지 대안도 켄진시오즈 아니 숨 세메 데코너니 되버서야 되긴 돼봐 로고 까말실에 저거 기아 다주도가 저거디 나리야 디송샤 땡중 니체 윤재기 땡중 시베거네 원도 주야 뚜주고 땡디 시베거네 내리 주야 스타티송인 바래 자상가 저바 처음에 버디 주야기 갸젠디 땡중 그 따라 타네 주야지 다들 산제베 투모모임 부지래샤 산제베 최 투모모임 부지 애니 니네 저바 처음에 봤어야 돼 겨운 것이 캐말하네 선 네가 장장래 다 들이켜서 저분이 네가 알아 다 새다 민상원 민망불 녀석 속도가 얘는 남자와 대국도 그러나 아메리카리아 그 나와 죽집에 나오고요 새 죽지기 텐진디 준비 제리아 September 11th 야 텐진 준비 제리아 다 아메리카 지단 아메리카 나리아 지 직나로 샤나로 사바실레아로 근데 탐자도 산자서로 되게 용되기도 와 디디 세다 저발 때네 미는 감자리고 아다 근데 이제 저물이 가서 갈래다 가서 갈라 세 괜찮니 매망고 다 가서 되잖아 아프가니스탄 에 이라크 다 들나 차샤나 아무 세 게임에 동네 쉬우 정도 violence 하디 나보 먹고도 와 violence 러버이나 차워스 러버이나 뭐서 때 샬리아 지 수동 제버디 차와리 다세 림버루야 또 서브치베이나 아니 장고마치야 딕진샤야 함바샤야 다 딘리기 지 장된 매바 딘리기 다 자주 릭 참을로 패시 체제리 나네 딕진샤 고고다 제 나는 남주래서 이기권에 지금 낙선에서 블록다셔야 돼 상담이나 상무거리나 체제적으로 자 드레 인도산에 저분이 디가라 다 더리께서 점니 끌리야다 corruption사 고소 주송 다 시부정되게 하래 다 디게디 탈도나 세례가로도 자 드레 인도산에 다 아주 차와 도미아스네디 치침에 계시 말해 sen 네가 나는 샤샤네 점불니 디기 넘어지다 김산 디기 넘어지 미게 그소서 디기 대신 끼고 파페를 주거나 처음에 지금 잡고 해야 돼 쉬우지 계신 분이셔 다 뒤용야 주지 댄지 잡을 중으로 왔어야 돼 껴치매 계시게 시가 말해 탈백게 시가 말해 그sen 네가 나라 다들 뭐 스토야 아주 대화 동에서야 돼 교도 깨를 때려 그래 근데 인도잖아요 제부 디긴 거나 대 용야 교도 깨를 더나 쳤지 그래서 나 교기 치 뭐부터 드르테 튕겨지더래 있는 쪼쪼데 난게 셈을 시디야나 디디기 영향을 싸워래도 와다 다 시디 영향이 셈기 시디 영향이 쪼로 찍디 셈 시디 쪼게한테 가래도 봐 디셔버체 셈 시디 쪼게한테 셔버체니 대 똑다 아니 셈기 연된지 다 모심에 타네 될 당도잖아 아니 셈 시디 연구로 셈기 시디 쪼게한테 공로래 대샤래 아니 마게 차도 뒤에 생식이 쪼이고 뒤 독자지想找钱呢 차도 서서 야 말해 想找钱呢 想找钱呢 空手是要말해 我当时要말해 我当时的就차도学的就这个图书学的第想了想的这个结尾呢될图书学말봐 될 tex트学말봐 될我等말봐 봐야 저 뒤에 인도잖아요 다 타르도는 칠로 층들 저 야오샤여데 근데 타르도인데 소소스 self discipline 소소스 정정성이야 self discipline 자 대대 도도가 self discipline 요야 돼 moral ethic 도도가 랑이 친구로 이지 친구로 어디를 셔 당연 자동
So let's first have tea. So as I've said before, the Dharma, Buddha Dharma comes down mainly to 2 points. He's saying that those who have strong teeth should bite the bread. Otherwise, if you don't have strong teeth, you can soak the bread in your tea and then eat. So the 2 points that Buddhism comes down to are the moral conduct of non-violence or non-harming, and then the philosophical view of independent origination or interdependent nature of things. And so with regard to the first point, the best is if you could try to do things which can help others, which will be beneficial to others. Even if you cannot help others, do not harm them. So the reason why we say we should not harm others, why the Buddha has taught that we should not harm others, is basically because we as individuals, no one wants suffering at all, but what we want is happiness. So if you want to have the happiness that you wish or desire and don't want suffering, then you should avoid the cause which gives rise to the sufferings. And therefore, within the so here the reason why you need to help others is because of being dependent on others. On the one hand, in the case of this dependence, the view of interdependent nature of things, which is also divided into 2, the first one being that of the dependence in terms of causality, that causes give rise to effect, and which all the 4 different philosophical schools of Buddhism accept commonly. And then the second one is that of dependence by way of designation, or dependence in terms of relativity, in terms of relation to others. And so because the suffering and happiness that we, on the one hand suffering that we don't want and the happiness that we want are based on the law of causality. You have to think about this law of causality, and therefore, according to the law of causality, what happens is, if you harm others, you would have, as a consequence of that, you would suffer in the end. You will, and whereas if you help others, if you benefit others, then the consequence is that of happiness for yourself. And therefore, thinking in terms along that line, we should avoid the causes which bring about suffering and misery and problems to us, but cultivate those which bring about happiness. And so, with regard to suffering, there are, of course, three types of suffering, such as the painful suffering, or the suffering of suffering, such as the painful experiences in the lower realms of existence. And therefore, thinking about this law of causality, how such negative causes bring about such effect of misery in lower realms and so forth, you have to think about avoiding those causes which bringing suffering to yourself. And therefore, you should think of not harming others, but helping others, because by doing that, by creating this cause that help others, that benefit others, what you are actually creating is the cause for attaining or higher rebirth in the next life. Even in this life, of course, if you do good to others, if you are kind to others and so forth, then of course you will also have the benefit for yourself. And so, with regards to the result or our objectives or goals, there is a temporary goal of higher rebirth and the ultimate goal of nirvana or liberation or definite goodness, which is mentioned by Master Nagarjuna in his jewel garland. And so in this way, by basing our conduct on the understanding of the law of causality, we should avoid, we'll be able to avoid the negative actions, negative karma, thereby create the positive karma, thereby bringing ourselves to the fruition of the higher rebirth in the next lives. And then based on the understanding of dependent origination in terms of dependent origination in terms of the things being designated or just relative, what we can do is create the causes for the liberation. Usually what happens to us is that when we see things or hear about things, we have this notion of things having some kind of independent existence. We call that they stand alone kind of entities and not related or not connected to others or dependent on others. But that's not the reality. The reality is that everything is dependent on something else. And so therefore, if when you think about the misery or the suffering and happiness that you, on the one hand, don't want, and the other you want, what you can see is that they are also dependent on their own causes and conditions and other factors. And therefore, what we usually see is that things have their own self entity or some kind of essence in them, that they are independent, and therefore, because of looking at such a way of existence, we create the causes for suffering. And but then, if you are able to see that things are rather dependent on other factors, many different other factors, and that they are related to others, and therefore your usual way of looking at things could be called the strength of that could be reduced slowly, and then gradually what will happen is you'll be able to overcome this misconception of things and yourself having any kind of independent existence. And in this way, you'll be able to overcome the causes which bind us in samsara, and you'll be able to create the causes, the insight into the dependent nature of things, the designated nature of things, that they are merely nominal, and gain that insight and further develop it, strength, and then overcome the causes completely, the negative thoughts and emotions completely, and bring yourself to nirvana. So in this way, this is what Kamala Shila mentions in one of his treatises, that based on the understanding of the law of causality, you'll be able to create the causes for higher rebirth. Based on the understanding of the dependent nature of things, that things are relative, that things are related and connected, designated, you'll be able to create the causes for the liberation. And so even in this world, we can see how much negative actions such as violence create so much misery to so many people. And so we don't have to go into the religious import of the understanding of dependent nature and practice of non-violence, but we can even see the effect of practicing non-violence and or violence in this life itself. And so if we think about the 9/11 incident, I mean, that is because of violence, and violence is because of not being disciplined, I mean, mentally. And so we have to practice compassion and be self-disciplined, because from there comes peace of mind, and self-discipline in turn is based on moral ethics.
Nelly Duvia Tolazana, Mondo Shallow doing Gari. Digic. Then guess a jewel under the Chinanga Paja Shiva shows, and Shuguti guess a jewel Jubo shows, and a Namjan Duviaki. Tuni needs Sundu Jube, that Lamsana Dene. And Namgi Kava Duyagi, the Ninja Tuni Sundu Gasek Jabal Jubusho such.
In the prayer that the Chinese recite, this 4-line prayer in the beginning after the Heart Sutra, where it says in the first line, may the 3 poisons of afflictive emotions be dispelled. And so how this could be done is not just merely through prayers, but you have to overcome these negative thoughts and emotions within ourselves through the application of the path, the understanding of insight, developing the insight into the true nature of things. And thereby, if you, by overcoming the negative thoughts and emotions, you'll be able to reach that nirvana. And so if you put the effort in overcoming the negative thoughts and emotions and try to reach, create the causes to attain nirvana, then alongside of that practice, you'll be creating causes for higher rebirth as well. So that comes as a byproduct of practicing the causes for liberation. And then in the 4th line, the prayer says, may we engage in the bodhisattva practices. Now, bodhisattva practices, what happens when you do bodhisattva practices is you'll be able to attain the omniscient state of Buddhahood, and that can come through the combination of understanding of emptiness and that compassion.
Nelly Tavalla, Mondo never talk over it. Caras Lavina, Nelly Tuya, any Casur Pigay, Tatunya Tawa, Desujadi, Mr. Metavachimbe Dusane, me Namju, Mundu Luding, me Namju Manor, Chakin. Sadini Dusane, Milu Mondo never to talk actually. Sadini Indu, Umaship Jebenalia. Any Gomuluda, Sagitu, Pavale, Umashikebenalia, any Sona member Tambunda, Pato Dan and Doberche, Tamar Tashi Gundova, Tishitene, Karain, Sesore. Or Digi any Dedevu that Dambe Chuzu Mundung Neli, Dujala Shani, 다 대 주지기 주주 아니 저가 처음에 받아 다와 된중사하게 산제베 최대 냠니시하게 림버디 수능은 뭐 당불도스 수능 인벨레 즉 속주로 속 너는 시야로 세 레디 당부 동고리 수능 뭐 당불도스 다들 가서 가면 좋은 신기 미기 주문 그 수림 다 디기 수능은 뭐 당불도스 해야 디차리 다 미기 주문 그 수림을 넘네 뭔들 류된 상부주 톱톱으리 대삼시 모디버데 투모리 애니 이슈도 가지도데 투모리 자 드니 미두산에 다 파도 다는 도버시 사디기 다 되기 간다 넬리 주야기 애니 다 때는 딱be 띵중 그 시에 관에 등진을 냠부 때네 등진기 깨베 애니 냐얼레베 풍부 두지 동에 다디 애니 바 단도 쳐야지 다 타막 다시 군도 와서야 돼 다운도 바로 다는도 와서야 돼야 등진 라과를 잖네 다 다음에 참무 관배 너도 교야기 제도 토마 다음에 라고 때 델레자야지 이거래 다 아등에 쉬야지는 다 강사가 다음에 참으라는 삼다니 봐도 다는도 걸치 있어야 되지 탐을 다시 군도 와서야 되기 에네 다도 진배 샤베 에네 박자 시제트버 대중야라 에네 가서 우리 그게 동반이 애니 탑기 남부 끊는 데 몇 권에 그바 용수업의 주의 애니 동이 고미야 세상가 윤집 짬뽕야의 제도 동이 고미인데 동이 그바 용수업의 주의 고미야디 뭐 정말 동반이 고미야디 시집뽕의 제도 고민되잖아요 그바 용수업의 주의 동이 공개하래 대 시들 중에 네가 차상 영화를야 갑진게 손하고 소 다시도 쓰면 주고 요아리 그래서 어떻게 탐을 다시 근도와 써야 되기 아니 남긴 줘야 되지 그래서 어다 그림도 쓰는 로거레스 대시테니 캐바인스 다 든데지기다 냠네 게 내시바데 라렌르게니 냠네 생각이 주나 다디 대고치 중 용수서다 람냠네 생각이다 드부 운동엘이 타비아베 탑다 마시고 shum버리 스타디 송이야 디시드니 캐바인스
So that was what has been said earlier was just to give you a big framework within which we can talk about the Buddhist view and its practice or conduct. And so having understood that, then how do you actually put that into practice? Put these two, the conduct and the view, into practice. First of all, with regards to, in order to reach that of liberation, the definite goodness or liberation, it is necessary, imperative that you attain a higher rebirth, like a human rebirth, for example, without which you cannot use your intelligence much. If you are born into lower realms of existence and so forth, there is no way you can use the intelligence like human beings. And so we need to have gain higher rebirth in order to reach the highest goal of liberation. And so this is imperative. And therefore, with regard to doing the practices of attaining higher rebirth and then the liberation and final omniscient state of Buddhahood, and Aryadeva in his 400 verses has said, initially, first one must avoid those of the non-meritorious causes, the karmas, which means that you have to avoid doing harmful actions, which are like violence and violent actions, which in turn can be done by practicing the morality of called morality of avoiding the 10 non-virtuous actions. And so if you do that through the practice or the cultivation of these the 10 virtuous actions, the morality of 10 virtuous actions, then you'll be able to gain a higher rebirth in the next life. And of course, doing such practice is also common to non-Buddhist schools, non-Buddhist religious traditions like Christianity or Islam and so forth. They also have these practices which can be causes for higher rebirth. But then what we need in Buddhism especially is not only satisfying with that, but we need to create the causes for reaching that the liberation, the definite goodness, and which is to say that to overcome all the types of suffering, and mainly this the existential pervasive conditioning existential suffering completely. When you put an end to this suffering, then you will have reached the nirvana or liberation. So this is our one goal in Buddhism, and that for that, Aryadeva says, in the middle, one should overcome the clinging to self. And this ego clinging, and then of course by overcoming the ego clinging and all these negative thoughts and emotions, you'll reach nirvana. But here, this is also brought about by the understanding of the dependent nature of things in terms of how they are designated and relative to and connected to others. And so on the basis of understanding that, then you'll be creating the causes for the liberation, freedom from suffering. And now that alone is not sufficient. What we need to also develop is, as Aryadeva says in his 400 verses, that in the third line where he says, in the end one should overcome all types of views, the distorted views, and so what that refers to is to overcome not only the ego clinging, but also even the imprint left by it, and thereby attaining the omniscient state of Buddhahood with the help of vast amount of merit that you would also accumulate to overcome cognitive obscuration. So in this way, if you are able to journey along that path, you'll be called a wise one.
산집에 취지고 계속 말이 저당 아주 최대한이 이내 댄지드버는 중 세하기 더도 디키어 보이나 홀리스틱 용되기도 와. 지 수급에나 난 수급 난 나서 심해야나야. 아니 수급지고 리아 그게 가수를 그게 죄셔봐 많이 봐. 즉 쌤 그게 다 파배우서야. 쌤을 지게 당 남자 마요야. 즉 쌤을이야 그게 쪼나리아로 충분히나 리뷰 처전에 팽겨야 돼 봐. 다들 저기 홀리스틱스네. 리지고 계시면 뭐지? 그거를 지금 쌤이 따디나 딱 가서 우리 그게 그 전제된 저어야 돼 지금. 다 제대로 돼 참에 대 말한 저지 가서 우리 그게 고유 차샤네. 미크도 그도 지금 여제 무슨 소고 찍어 뭐임 봐. 아주 강도 내세 내디 고유 그게 다 집에나 가서 주고 돼. oxygen 롱상마 디지털이 다 참아 저어야 되지 통도. 다 하고 벤저를 찾아봐이나 안데다 벤저 벌거변나 로슨스 콜리아 벤저 강에 채버리 벤저 강에 채야디 벤저 캐버든들이야 네 기스티 되게 가서 기스티 가르스 내한테 가서 뭐 장구이 벤저 내가 나름지 채버이나 어다 든다 지금 나로로 걸어 지그리스 다 안데 미 벤저 내가 지금 디디베 니는 순전에 벤저 코라 전쟁의 지리 뜻이 걸어도 가르쳐 주버렸으니 계시지 자자가 미스 벤저 콜이야 배 장대버지기 얘는 골라줘야 돼 가져 있는다 아메리카 나한테 유럽 나한테 자 드리인데 그것도 디스도 와 벤저 녀들네 뒤에 처직네 디리스 다바 당함 사타버리스 당함 그 턴에 마음발라 지 존재 땡중기 패뉴 컨트 되기 위해 메디선 마커르체 크도 거라 캡산 강시 영야지 sometimes 디식도 so that the danger of you the do the other 다당아 캡산지 저기 열대 마음발에 양강에 가르쳐 그래 디 성코그로다 코고 해줘 그 홀리스틱 뷰 좀 보이나 자자 environment 그 크루 관리야 지 냠자 영향이 견스 찍디 저번에 네가 미 지다 솔레 던지셔도 지 딱강와야도 신나 줘지셔도 저기 그 삼바로 좀 마시면 제제 그걸 쳐지기 캡사 찍고 가 삼지 단체 다 뒤역도 이거 대단 세고도 서다 드즈체디 그 땡중기 떠두디 키리나 나다식 단저 털이네 땡중 떠두킨 또 스텝이나 삼로도 따쳐을 내요 그지 최대 거리네 삼로 따쳐을 되는지 저물리 벤저 걸 집이네 그 따쳐부지 삼로 거리나 안된 역도 되지 배질 마요야 되셔 저 드리인도 어디 셔디요 다와디 용서디 낭베 shum네 셔버리디 디 떠두디 자서디 저물링기다 간다 김상지기 대화 동네에 소원지기 미개버지기 최된 그 차네 최된의 송 김상지기 난게 디지 지소 지용 그 디지 전부리 지 디지 즉 상물로 된 저야다 디 판다야레스 디셰이 디 패지레샤 딘중 그 상물로 된 지 여지나 내서 가르통 있네 아 다디 둑카레 깽카레 둑컨디스도 깽컨디스도 둑 상물 코용으로 디 코용도 전에 지 다침부 코고도 라는 학벌 셰당세야디 내 넘기도 셰되기요 셰당께 인도잖아요 다 차당 그 적도 줘야 되고 게 인도 코라 미버 랑선버지기 지고도가 코 캐리아로 지고도가 그런 거 안저 콩도 사이도잖아요 셈제 콩도 사세 유치라고 지 미지고도면도 콩도 사이인데 미드볼 콩도 사이인데 미치라고 지 로를 샤워 타네 다테 로섭도서 삼버지기 신에 당을로지 되고도 다 저물리기 미치리야 시단께 도도 도도 민고 마시버지리야 시단께도 띵문도 배지기고 말해 그래서 시단께서 유직벽에 조조스지기 넉티지고도 넉티디에 담바 딱봐 교원매되네 다 담바 있나 그 때문에 라왕 거 줘 있나 그 때문에 소리지 로를 샤인도 얘네 그 착강네 믿고 로를 샤인 거야 봐. 자, 내 모습에 아메리게 천리고지, 생구 천리고지. 또 생구 천리 소리. 생구 나자 영해줘. 다리 맨주징 천리고지. 가서 그 명字사면네.
Aaron Beck.
아,
Aaron Beck.
Aaron Beck.
No.
Aaron Beck. Aaron Ray.
No.
Aaron Beck. 공인이 내가 로카시 컨트롤 저는 공로 대주 적실해. 저 공스도 공기 심주도 세는 연두잖아요. 그러나 양용 때문에 초동식 개위 연두 미 공도랑 연두 공도랑세 유디 차 탐전에 믿고지 가서로 넘겨 알았어. 이내 대응 오면 더라. 가족 구조 탐바 소수 남도 좋다 하셔버지래 마도 대응을 그게 믿고도 야 말했어. 디식도. 다들 나보산제베 슝네 취미이지 남도 그 좋다. 아니 이동 체이동 체이도면 로를 샤가거네 차단 기기버지 남배숑수한테 찍어지게 하래샤 그래서 어디에 인도산에 그 신앙도 로도 제 깨세 유디 미버디 그 랑자바 제라고 죽고도 단 닝지사도 제디 야그 머리별 차치고 매버체 코리아 지금 듬베지 미르산에 배지 딛고야 말해 심지 찔림이 닝지 랑了别拉呢甚至这里面宁是拍是接头的 용도와 무엇이마시 계시겠는가 동네 메도부터 대원도부터 인신제라 따디디 동네를 전에 그쯤으로 삼별로지 개토 시에다 심지질을 미니시다 기다 그래서 가고 그래 또 그냥 상도다 벌써 드리기 전에 띵중세되기 또 다치고 소리 전에 이 주소고 이 맵 차인 거. 소서 막아서 트랜스럽도 거래돼. 차상으로 거래 제시를 소리지.但디 균제 띵중 상담이나 균제 띵중다 뒤로 상담이나 그게 제거하기 뒤에 망고 지여도 차윤도 콩도 사세 배 랑스으로 넉디고 라루도. 그래서
And so in order to reach that highest goal of enlightenment or Buddhahood, one needs to develop the understanding of selflessness or emptiness with the help of a huge amount of merit. And therefore it becomes understanding or insight into emptiness helped by the skillful means or method which is complete. And so when you have all these courses complete, then you will be able to overcome even the cognitive obscurations, and thereby you will be called a wise one. Now if you although this interdependent nature of things is taught in Buddhism, but it can be applied to any kind of field of knowledge or research and so forth. For example, if you understand the interdependent nature of things, for example, with regard to your own physical health, when you are sick, I mean, if you just focus on overcoming this sickness, the disease itself, it won't be so effective sometimes. But if you try to think that about the different conditions which may have caused this sickness, then and try to treat your mind to gain more peace and calmness and all this, then perhaps you'll be able to cure the disease, the physical sickness better. And so it'll be really helpful to see that this sickness has come through many different causes and conditions, and not just because of your body, but also because of the state of your mind. And therefore, if you treat your mind then you'll be able to treat the sickness, and the physical health will be cured better. And so similarly, this understanding of interdependent nature of things could be used in the environment, for example, not just focusing on some amenities that you would have in your life, but if you think about the environment as a whole, your survival is dependent on a clean atmosphere as well. And so oxygen is needed. If you have clean oxygen in your environment, atmosphere, then you'll also be able to have a good environment around you. And so in this way, an understanding of dependent origination in this kind of sense, even in environment, is helpful. And similarly, it is the case with economy. Since about 3 years, there has been this economic crisis in the world, and I had been asking the experts on economy about why there has been this kind of a crisis. I mean, why this crisis happened. And I've said to them, if I were to do something with commerce or some business and things like that, then there would be a disaster immediately. But why these people who are even not just in their waking state, but even maybe in their dreams, they only dream about money and wealth and all this. And even so, why this crisis had happened? And the response I got was that because of greed, people have not been able to think about the long-term effect, consequences of what they do now, and they only think about the immediate profit and not thinking about the future, and therefore this crisis has happened. And so even for people, who are the economic, experts in economy and business and so forth, if they could understand that what they do now could have consequences in the future, and therefore things are interdependent, and that many different causes and conditions come together to give rise to some effect, and therefore not just focusing on the immediate profit, but also thinking about the future benefits for themselves and others, the larger community and so forth, then of course it would be really helpful, beneficial. So this understanding of interdependent nature for them could be really beneficial. And even this is also the case with deforestation, mining and industry, and industrializing the different places. So if you only think about immediate benefit, profit and all that, and just not concerned about the future consequences, negative consequences that you would actually that would actually happen through your action, then you would always cause disaster in environment and economy and other fields. And so in all these different fields, even as individuals, we need to understand the interdependent nature of things at the family level, at community level, and global level. If you have all the understanding of the interdependent nature of things, then you would have a holistic view of things, that you would have a wider perspective, see things from a wider perspective, and not just focus on narrowly on the immediate result and profit. And so even in the case of our emotions like anger or attachment and so forth, if we see the target, if we look at for example, when you become angry, you always look for you have this notion of the person to whom you are angry at as being something absolute sort of target of your anger. But then of course you may be angry, you may when you become angry at that person, you will have that kind of absolute target in your mind, and feel angry and hate the person and to try to think of harming them and so forth. But then perhaps you may be able to become angry at an individual or few people. But if you just think whether you will be able to, would you be able to take the whole of the humanity and become angry at them? Perhaps not. And so when you become angry, what happens is you always have an absolute target. When that happens, what notion you have is that the person that you are angry at is not dependent on any other factors, that you have an absolute target, and that person is not independently, it seems to have some independent existing as a negative person to you. But that's not the case, actually. One of my friends, psychiatrist, American psychiatrist named Aaron Beck, has said that when you become angry, you see the other person is totally angry, 100% bad, but that's not the case. 90% of it is our projection. And so this is the same taught in Buddhism as well.
지들면시 시대신 내가 지시 따고 차 둘 말해 그러 어디에 다디나 때는 좀 들어와다 때는 가고 들어야나 직장에서 뭐이나 지워지도 따고 쳤다 되기 다 최선제 다음에 말해 답을 못 주래 셋 다 소는 것도 와. 다 대바로 뭐 주에 다 경제 최기인 모니 주에当然 취미 된지다 유연의 실체고요. 다 가서 싶은 것이 대변이 사지 체 그것도 전도 때 봤어요. 대야에니 마다 맞아요. 뭐야? 그게 다 남대하다 지 저치 편리유대 최직체. 제 그것도 뭐지? 다 편리 뭐서 제니 그게 지 가서 그게 뇌미도 여대니确定一路可能是来的，确定我到确切的提醒，如果是我到那开始做好，稍微大不一呢，你也没得事。当然是这可所谓去属性的去可能这本来risk的呢，risk的马达马这边嘛呢，可给杀到아니 나한테는 몽구주의 좀땡이 공부주의 같은 리스스요. 다 리스에 뭐도 가만히서 그래. 입들 쓰고 그래. 카드들 쓰고 그래. 디차 또다 사다 지금 잡으면 이거 쓰고 그랬잖아. 디디 입디 입들마다 리드 말해. 카드에 입 리드 카드들마다 리드 말해. 리제니 공부 차셔 지 도다 지 사다 주제리 리디 차셔마다 리마리 또 다시 보이나 리스트라디 마다 맞으면 안에 리스트러니 린자야요래 라가야요래 패널을 건 레디가 거의 때때 여 다셔래 레디네 그 나좀 될 참 하셔지 봐봐도 사무스타면이나 니하베더지 다다 그때 나 사지 사무스타면이나 가슴에들 가서 그냥 럽차르지 나 세는 마다 맞으면 알아 나 열어다 나로 나한테 나 죄인 게 나 있는 상황된 게 세네 나한테 저거 ken야 말다 당 나한테 가서 거래서 도 봐봐 사무스타면이나 류딩 알베 샘딩 알베 도 봐 사무스타면이나 니아베 되지 다 망세지기 나오냐베 다시 나오냐베 로코라 나서디 나이베 소지 시에바 코란 그 때문에 나지 다 만로 상주로 차대야지 디 지당 미상도 마세베 지금 산제베 준도마베 나리네 나세야데 파 주구주나 시에베간에 양은 근시기 남시 시어 초 계시 다 룽전장 그 섬섬 집에 있나 아니 남시 초 계시제 시어 룽모데 그뒤에다 내댕에 지기 시어 룽모데 아니 그시자지 직샤네 다디 강사세야 모두 누구주서 되리지 시기하래 우모베 나리네 타녀도 랑제 신경기 다 타녀도 랑제 싫었네 다 단다디 간단 안 하더라 지난 그 추억하이네 팔문에 링이 짓는 것도 봐. 디 예배 예세지. 타녀도 좀 세지. 다 디니 단단발 아니 바자베이나 아니 니아메더지. 사다 낭섬지기 오지 예되지. 다 디타네 그 방문에 두베 이르잖아요. 강사 방문에 즉 샤르 이르잖아요. 그 방문에 강사 들으시는 누구주스 고려하러 왔다. 그래서 들이 이르잖아요. 이기 남시 sen시기 남시 살때 아니 강사 누구주스 들으시잖아요. 속도. 자사가 시외간에 강사가 sen시 샤용 거야. 다지 지자버서 이기 쉐버서야 러션다. 러셔와 다디 양 신의 바상으로 담배 있나? 이기셔 아주 공연시범 지금 유를 중립에 공연시에 저 제시에 내걸라 공의 시바 대다 대창배 이루직도와 이시직도와 된적이 이시디 나래서 러고 중네 니 구베 내걸로 야말 받고 그 가사로 그 전지그 공의 시바지 가사도 대지선도 안돼 야말 받다 다 밀는 내걸로다 양시 밀는 나와로 직샤야 되지다 대다 대 레아프가 똑주징에 이루직인 거로 된제디 나를 샤워 주나 니 투부쿠니 니는 매번 내걸려야 애는 나디야 샤스매지 차고도 니 투부쿠에 내걸려 되게 이루고에 메도가 밀는 내걸고 이루디 가사로 야바로 다 더동 대바바 침배이나 그래서 넘지배 재미 깨야 소리는 용되기도 와 되게 옆에 그돌이야 미디 여러 나한테 여러다 미디 여러다 미디 깨야 다 미디 가서 거슬러 이나 그 유진에게 시바로 이제 이것도 되면 누가 다 시바 차로 만들어 되겠지 다 시바 참문디니 미디 센시들에서 라베이나 시바 참문디 바라샤 내걸로 미디 바라샤서 놓고 주네 가고로다 맞아도 봐 저자 시베 때문에 그리 상당가 시베이네 다 가샤토야 잡아잡아 있는 샤토에서 가고 자 드린 인도산에 마다 마저방안에 마사지해야 돼 봐. 다봐 당시 째나 니기면 되지. 다 치질 집에 있는다. 난 집에 있는다. 다 르르 집에 있는 대티신지. 지금 시바코르 집에 있는 대티신지. 그 니야면 되지. 르기 차더니 숙전 인도산에 숙전 초기 차도 잡아서 마도 초기 참매배 숙전 야마래. 뒤 철어가는 집에 있네. 뒤 시도 차여가는 집에 있네. 그 여여를 싫어. 그 할람배 차시 쓰기 매듭지가 레베 있네. 그 여대요. 그 여대들잖아요. 그 눈쇼직다. 겹쇼직면은 그 여시 샤식만. 그 여스를 들잖아요. 그 겹쇼직다. 눈쇼직도 와. 그래서 차니도 와 돼. 샤론도 장게 차신 시우지 타고가 레인데 샤모트네 그 여야 차시도 와. 저 든지 차시다. 겹고 차시도 와. 자시로 가다 라진이베 나리야. 아니 롱 따고 써야 되나 손은 시리. 딱그 여야 차지. 그 여대도잖아요. 그 여세 등을 주다. 송심베 그다. 저에 차로 찍다. 다 저 가서다. 저에 뭐 찍다. 손에 뭐 찍. 니 모르다. 자 드린 일산에 뒤터로 갈 집에 있네. 그 차도 째야 되잖아요. 그 애니 차도 째에 차제 사가치나 니야도. 차제 매나 차제 용마로. 차제 샤연데 디 차제인데 차제를 말도 차제도 말와. 저 차제 뭐냐면도. 차제 매나 대차제를 하신 말와. 영도도 어떻게 돼야 돼. 저 어디들이 어떤 시바를 차시는 시바기지 참에 샤도에서 가고 그래. 시바 두주 통수집에 있네. 나만은 되든지다. 치면은 되든지. 기지 나만은 되든지다. 치면은 되든지. 매나 기지균 투 말와. 기지균 투야지. 친절해야 그 기지 나만은 되 차지다. 기지 치면은 되든지. 용고로. 저는 참이 큰 샤미도. 다 들어서 상당한 거 있나? 그 유경원에 들이 세는 조조서 싸우는 매대지. 다 뒤인데 다 저니버디 다 때네 매버리 베슬로나 때네 야 말했을로나 애니 패는데 용심만 패는데도 나이 어렵다. 지체들이 어렵다. 숙진들이 어렵다. 시바들이 어렵다. 이네다 자는 이야기도 다 뒤를 가르쳐 버슬로나 세당 코라 낭성 대 무슨 부지 봐 제기하래 디 제주자네 그 정신의 차원을 말하고 마다 마저의 명성 대가를 잘 말하다 여서의 명성 대가를 여버를 말도 다시 전에 니 여버지기 여당지 야말와 저사 모니지 모르겠어 다 디셰기하래 다 타면 들을 때다 진짜 인도 다 봐봐 상당인데 다 때는 주버리 사지 마도 샤야면 되지 때는 딱거리 사지 샤야지 디바는 좋습니다. 다들 양자적 상무시다. ngaranzoya 친한 그 쳐 나윤도 전에 때에 딱 watch 너기도 와. 방문이 여시는 것도 와. 다 신의 잘 줘도 와. 상당히 윤도 때에 딱 잡지 마도 매대버지 리베제제제도 네번예도 와. 딩 네번예에 제리야 신의 가지고 그르쳐고 상무스담이나 유진의 여버지 샤리고도 와. 다 유진의 샤워 유진의 여버지 샤대야 돼. 머리에 로트비에 바자고 한게 그 샤테버를 마도 그 전에 방문에 여버지 제제 다 샤와 말이스 근데 나온다도 주면 또래지 다 쳐서 로라 레고도 어다 되게 땡중사 디셔요 다 쟤네 딱 섬레스 지금도
And so we go through the text now. Verse number 32 shows that of selflessness and that there is nothing which exists truly. And it shows that the reason or the proof for there being empty, things being empty, or in other words, proving that the reality, the suchness, reality of things. And therefore, in the Madhyamaka philosophy, we need to understand the two truths, the conventional truth and the ultimate truth. Conventional truth means that things exist when we don't do any kind of logical analysis into them, but just accept conventionally what is known to us and conventionally, which means that things affect us in our life. They sometimes harm us, sometimes help us, and so forth. So these the effects can be felt of things, and so this is something that we cannot deny.
스고르보다 제가 뒤야 삼상국도와 뒤에 세세시국이 분배가 다스럽 신경 말이야 분배가 올로 신경 세신 말아 안당간주 디스 슝구나가 다음에 사가 다디 우무십제베 제베나라 다차가 제셔 우무십제베 아얀데제 딘제바 다차가 제셔 디나라야 아도 쉽게 식패지들이 강화 때는 중요봐 대내 라완 민주로 디근 라완 해봐대 대나 다네 여만 인사하게 다디 스지 디기 잡아도 막 꼬인도잖아 잡아도 경윤도 달라 다제 자원이 다사야돼 달라 다제 자원이 근심 모분 남기 샤나 라마레베 오정신 때 다서야지 나오냐면 차가 오오서야지 맞다. 진짜 자가 나는 오오서야지 봐. 즉 다미서야 다디 오오서들 자리에는 견사시킬 거예요. 그렇지. 구두에. 나도 공대하러다. 나도 다미 쓰잖아요. 그 각자 다스러 윤도 디스거마다 각자 다스러도 각자 나요 말씀 지금 해 봐. 그래서 디직 세세시고 오는 삼찬수.
So His Holiness wanted the Chinese translator to clarify this, the meaning of when self, when we say things do not have any selfhood. The term that the Chinese translator is using is will, I don't know, but there's what His Holiness was wanting, that the same term could be used in relation to an animate object like a vase. Anyway, with regard to this, the self that we are rejecting. Aryadeva in his 400 verses mentions that what is dependent on other factors, what arises through dependence, does not have any independent existence, and therefore all these things are without any independent existence. Therefore, they lack any self-identity or selfhood. And so when Master Chandrakirti comments on this verse, he said, the self here refers to the things, the identity of things being not dependent on others, or nature which is not dependent on others. So we have to make clear this point on the saints. So if the Chinese term wo is used in relation to inanimate objects, of course they do not have any mind as such. So perhaps this needs to be clear. This clarification needs to be done to the audience. No. So with regard to the English translation of Da as self, there's not much problem like the Chinese term wo for self here.
So Ziji, self, quite similar. Self and I, some difference.
So in other words, now if we deny the things which affect us directly or indirectly cannot be denied of their existence. But having said that, if you ask what really is there in ourselves and others, of course, when you do such analysis into where a person is, what a thing is within itself, or then, of course, under such analysis, you will not be able to find anything. Nothing can be found through analysis. But then, conventionally, of course, the hills, mountains, and so forth do exist. A person does exist. And when we don't do this kind of analysis, whether the mountain or the hill is the shape or the form, color, and all the materials that make it up, and so forth, such as the soil, the rocks, and so forth, of course, we will not be able to find anything that we can point to as being the hill or the mountain in each and every the thing that is part of it. Of course, these individually are not the hill. The hill's color of the hill and the shape of the hill and the soil and the rocks and trees and so forth that make it up are not individually not the hill, but they are part of the hill. But then we can still say there is a hill up there. Without doing this kind of analysis, we can say that the hill is made up of all these different parts, and this whole mass is called, which is made up of these different parts, is called a hill. And so, we can talk about climbing a hill, called passing, going across called a high pass, and so forth. So a hill does exist, a high pass does exist. But when you do, when you try to find the hill or the high pass within the object itself, and taking apart all the different component factors, then you'll not be able to find it at all. And so, but still, the hill does exist. And similarly, it is the case with yourself. When you think of yourself, I'm doing this, I'm going, I'm sitting, I'm thinking, this is my body, this is my speech, my voice, and so forth. Of course, these have their existence. And you exist, your speech, your voice, your body, and all these exist. But then, if you ask whether your body is yourself, whether your voice is yourself or not, of course they are not. And many times what happens is some people say that although the body and the voice are not me, but then I could say that my mind is me, myself. Even in that case, in this case, even amongst the Buddhist philosophical schools, there are some schools who do posit that some part of the mind is the person. And for example, the scripture, the mind only school, which is called the follower of the scriptures, they say they make distinction of they divide or categorize consciousness or mind into 8 different categories. Categories, and say that the what is known as the foundational consciousness or alaya vijnana is the true identity of the person. So they do point to one of the consciousnesses, one of the 8 consciousnesses, as the identity, the final identity of the person as such. And similarly, in the case of the Madhyamaka, the Savattantrika Madhyamaka schools do posit the 6th consciousness as being the identity of the person.
규치스처레스 봐 제부 규치스 도도처레스 규디야나 제부죠 규디면은 제부면 좋아지 그러면 좀 좋아도 되고 샤송아 제자가 제부디 줄 때거든 다 양자지도 삼을담이나 두스네디 제부를 때도 와 랑 제부면은 디두스 민 때고 말아 규차야 말아 규모 주야디 규명의 판독지스도 판독지 차발라 판독지 여상 판독지 주버 판독지 누구면은 판독지 주스로 심마와 규모 주금이도 와 규모 성금이도 와 사디네 인도산에 규를 주버디 저울로 떠도 규든 저울이 깨버다 말이데 이네 규모 주버디 저울 떠도 와 규든 저울이 깨버렸을까 말고 응어지전 깨베기서 말이데 규모 주야 거라 저울로 떠도 자상가 균제사의 편주 뚜루르도 저부샤야고 야 귤때 바로 저부 거라 야 랑게 저울 때는 그 뚜루 규디 랑게 귤을 때는 그 저부로 자상가 그 가서 균제 모 주야로 거라 때는 주야지 마도 민도가 자상가다 우메중 나리야 샤자를 때는 참아를 때는 샤자스 나저를 손을 삽샤요 다 디기 샘샘으로 아니 정신되겠지 아니 샤자 주지 참아 주지 정신 강례용도 나 참아도 샤자 편주 때는 주지 샤투도 전에 참아 주지 제라고 지기 정신 공도 자들이 인도산에 다 간다 뚜주 신修지다 뚜주도 뭐냐 알으셨다 다 다른 집은 뚜주를 샤샤나 만상으로 뚜스무 시에그로 만상으로 대바 다다고 마음봤어 다 봐봐 장아 집에 있나 다다왔어야 돼 로 다와 샤 추주 까르마 까르셔봐도 집에 있나 까르시 대버리 까르시 펜셔도 대버리 까르시 순지도 마음버리 다다오면 누가 다다오면은 강을 되는 대바다 강을 되는 마음버리 샤식 말아 저서 내 마음 뜻이 다다오 거라 뭐니도 내 마음 사야지 샤바시면 소시도 가 다 마다 마시면 가네 샤통으로 다다와려야 까르마 다다와서 너 이는 돈도래 둔자 다다와서는 그로를 침버리 나 다다와서는 델레를 침버리 로 다다와서는 델레를 침버리 당 주변 깨바 다다와서 센츄리 다다와서 이나 로 다다와요 그래 깨바 다다와서는 that whole 가서다 이 코스모스를 어디 디디 거 차상지가 깨바로 저상가 그 랑즈마 캠도 그 때는 지금 자, 들이 인도 말아주 직된 영자래 그 상로와당 마도 멍고지 뚜르구탄에 샤샤시다 저도 편지 때는 샤야시 마도 때문에 라왕기 여버지 배지 아마래 때는 아주 로리야 확칼다 지 때문에 라왕기 여버지 로라 로 주에 바자가 왕게 샤때문에 마도 나 무슨 지대게 남샤 멍고지 때는 샤가시다르샤 양은 중조질 삼다네 에네 가서 그렇게 양은 대화직을 싸운다. 양은 중조직을 싸운다는 대대대 타냐지 하셔봐. 먹고도 와. 자, 들이 인도자네. 다 간다. 땡지도 떼는 줘봐. 사대. 땡들 손에 셔티거리. 떼는 줘. 떼는 담았어.
So when we think about the causes and effects, their effects, of course we can say that the effects arise from their causes and therefore they are dependent on their causes. And therefore there is this indispensable relation of the effects to its cause. Because without the cause the effect cannot arise at all. But then on the other hand, if you think about the cause itself, of course, when you say something is a cause, it gets this name cause in relation to its effect. And so without an effect, you cannot call something a cause as such. So if there is nothing to be brought about by the cause, of course you cannot have a cause as such. If it doesn't help anything, you cannot say it helps or it causes that. And so in order to call something a cause, you have to have an effect, and therefore in relation to the effect you have a cause, although the cause is not brought about by that particular effect that comes from it, but then it is dependent on it for its identity. And so therefore an effect is also dependent on, or a cause is dependent also on its effect. And then you can also think in terms of a cause being, when you have something which is called a cause of its effect, of course that cause itself has come from its own cause, and therefore in relation to that previous cause it is an effect, and in relation to what comes from it as its result, it is a cause. So in this way you can see how these the cause and effect are interrelated, interdependent on each other. And similarly, in the Madhyamaka philosophy, they say the objects and the cognition, which see them or which cognize them, are interdependent. Without there being an object to be perceived, you cannot have a perception. Without there being a perception, you cannot say that something is being perceived. So they are interrelated, interdependent. This is very clearly mentioned by Master Chandra Kirti. But in other philosophical schools, like lower philosophical schools, who accept some kind of a defined characteristic of things, they say the objects exist because we can have a valid cognition of the objects. And how do you prove that there is valid cognition of the objects? They say there is an perception, a self-awareness. And so because of that self-awareness, you can say there is a valid perception. And because of that perception, you can say there is an object. And so they give this kind of reasoning. But then if you carefully check whether things have some kind of independent existence, they're kind of a self-characterized, self-defined nature or not, without depending on other factors? Of course not. Everything we can find is dependent on something else. This is true. And then even with regard to the 3 times, past, future, and present. I mean, of course, they are interdependent. In relation to the present, you can talk about the past, and in relation to the present, you can talk about something in the future. And similarly, independence of the future, something is present or past, and so forth. So in this way, you can talk about interdependence in terms of time, in terms of our years, months, weeks, days, then hours, minutes, and seconds. And so when you come down to the seconds, of course you will say right now this is the first second, the second second, and so forth. But the minute you say this, some time have elapsed. And so it seems like even the present, if you carefully, if you really analyze where the present is, then you may not be able to pinpoint one moment as being present, because the moment you do that, some time have elapsed. Half is present, half is past, half is future. So in this way, even if you do an analysis of the present time, you may not be able to pinpoint that present as such. But then, conventionally, of course, we can talk about the present minute, which is, of course, short and short time period of time, and then we can talk about the present, the current week. We can talk about the current month, year, and the century, and so forth. But these are only on the conventional level. But not, if you look at the world, the things in the world, of course, you will see that there is nothing that is self-defined, that is independently existing without relation to something else. And so but then what appears to us is that things have some kind of independent existence without relation to others, called absolute of existence, which is not there at all. And so you called understanding of the dependent nature of things, interdependent nature of things, help us to see the reality correctly. So with regard to what has been left earlier, what I left I could not translate, we think about an I. Of course, the consciousness, if you point to the consciousness being I, then there are all these different sense consciousnesses. Of course, when we are awake, the sense consciousnesses work, but when we go to sleep, when we are in sleep, these don't work. So you cannot say the sense consciousness is an I, nor the dreaming state of called the dreaming consciousness cannot be said to be an I, because when you are in deep sleep and when you no more have any deep dream, that ceases. And similarly, when you go further in the subtle level of mind, when a person becomes unconscious, when a person faints, then of course we still can say, the person is still alive. But then, if the consciousness is at that point should be said to be the identity of the person, there is no consciousness as such. And so even when this the subtlest consciousness, if you say the subtlest consciousness at that point is the person, then you would also have to say the person is actually in a kind of a dormant state and not actively working as such. And so in this way, the consciousness, even within the consciousness, you cannot point to anything as being the person. But then a person is actually there. We cannot deny the fact that a person exists. Although the person cannot be found within the body or the mind. And even down to with regard to the body, even if you go down to the subtlest particle, you would still have to say the subtlest particle has its parts. Even if we may not be able to talk about parts in terms of the four directions and cardinal directions and intermediate directions and so forth, but then there is a movement always. The subtlest particle always moves. And so when you talk about a movement, there is a movement forward. And when you say the particle is moving forward, you also have something at its back. And so there is a reverse side as well. And so in this way, you cannot point to a person from within the body as well. But then everything is called dependent on its parts. I mean, that subtle particle also is dependent on its parts, and so the parts are dependent on its the whole, and the whole is dependent on its parts. So in this way, nothing could be finally, and therefore there is nothing which independently exists. Which just does not mean that that things do not exist at all, but they do exist by way of designation alone.
최선제 원이 주변 동래 송내기 떠주들이야 아니 엄마가 견주잖니 나 우모처럼 그 최선제 원이 주변 동래 쓰거래 원이지 모르나 코랑 그 원이지 모르나 뭐매 차주야래 뭐지야나 코랑 뭐도 주도야래 그래서 뭐 주위 코랑 뭐지 예가 있잖아요 뭐 주도야래 다뭐 주변 때에 다 뭐여 여신 시주로 봤어 대야 말해서 내가 이나 다 가면 차도도 왔잖아요. 전에하다 견주 다시 가서 그렇게 지대는 대 만데 타니에 그 지대 영락에 배 타니에 남샤 참을로 샤모 도치그 저랑 원이 좀 캐마나 엔다 가야 샤도 말했어. 남샤 가야 제도 말했어. 아니 무슨 일이냐 말했어. 소독스 나바 팬 다 델리야 뭐를 주고 팔래 기도잖아요. 강로 동반 이런 달라탐지 롱 강로 동님 이런 달라탐지 롱민주로 잖아요. 송샤 되게 아니 원이지 주변 동반이 동반이 따와서 캐라바 이나 아니 자시 참아 줘도 그래스 뒤주고 나서 참아 샤도 그래스 원이지 주변 캐라나 뒤주고 나서 샤도 말해 잖아요. 어디 뒤송이야 뒤송이라고 디고달이야 뭐루루기 렘마주 군데 뒤송도가 뭐마와래 렘마주 군데 뭐마와 결한게 똥니기 따라 가봐 마시버리스 똥니기 따라 똥번니기 뭐 마시버리스 에 똥번니기 더 마시버리스 송도가 똥번니기 가봐 마시버리스 똥니기 가봐 가르스로는 믹대 시고 거로 처나 뭐니지 주버지 샤바이나 믹대 하되기도 가사도 쉬우더래. 자, 디네 이르자네 믹대 타다 시구도자네. 에네 팔문에 주베 쳐 가야 매버지기. 그러다 랑문에 주베 쳐 가야 매버지기. 타치로 로슈나 믹대 식도도. 자, 디네 이르자네 가사다. 디네 이르자네 믹대 타다 식투야 따와디 원이 주베 똥 따와 대宽나마도 생기 배는 소진이 이동 그 따왔다고 아니 믹대 사식도 그러다 치든 캐고 원도 제외이나야 semgi tidugi di taba raksambashi Caroline duzane semgi tidugi miti shigundwa. Sajiri duzane wada 동리 있다가 그거데 미드사 식도고 그래서 직체. 애니 동반이 뭐디 애니 그 가다보게 저번 열시 소나 신기 내루부터 지침법에 녀대로 로디게 녀올이야 애니 나와서만 봐 가드 최저가 나와된 가드라지 요구도 봐스. 다 되게 다 개치들 안 되게 쉬어야 돼. 다 동리기 더 동리기 더 소인도잖아요. 애니 사실나리야. 댄신 잡을 중앙 강 대를 동반이도 시했어. 가슴을 쉬위마 동반이 있을 때디 지 동시지 예네. 동시 코랑기 예단디 셴라 때네 주마도 라왕게 주메 되지. 라왕게 주에 동안들 동반이 있어야 돼. 레마도 가야 매백게 주는 말이지. 어다 댄진 잡을 중앙 대를 동반이도 시했어. 댄진 잡을 중앙 댄진 잡을 중앙 디 동반이 동서야 돼. 댄진 잡을 중앙 멤버 라왕게 주베 동안들 동바선다 버리지. 자, 근데 인도산에 되게 아니 고아디 되네 떼내다고 돼있어. 최 강다 강이네 최초한테 주단데 샹의 때네 주어 있잖아요. 라왕 주변 동안스도 딱배 탔어요. 샹의 때네 주야 요되는지. 샹의 때네 요되는 게 뭐 있잖아요. 매배 탔어요. 근데 때네 딱 봐도 되니 우멜라미 노선에 송샤야. 와다 되기 딱 동력이 당연히 되지를 지송해야래. 다른 디슈데 되도가 때는 좀 줘봐. 때는 가버 줘봐나 직장에 봐 뭐이나 집어치다 또 버치. 일본 발랑 라이페. 일본 라스도 가서 우리게 때는 매버치. 뒤타직치. 발랑 라스도 타냐도 예버치. 또 타냐도 예버치. 다 가다 예버치. 자, 드레인도 일본 발랑 라이페 제대로 대시 취하는 어머니도 주고 채야 돼. 때네 주고 인도 라와가 주고 동안 딱 됐어요. 때네 따는 여러 인상 때네 매번 많이 봐. 찾았어요. 요하랬어. 어다티 타니세 우메 코아드 데리 스타디 소리.
在中论的第20品的时候呢，这个十四师他对这个中观师做了一些争论。那这个起的争论点，就是因为他们认为说这些诸法只要无自性的话呢，然后诸法。
And so, with regard to the understanding that things do not have any self-identity or independent existence from their own side, Master Nagarjuna deals with it in his Fundamental Wisdom treatise of the Middle Way. In the 24th chapter especially, he first of all sets up the arguments from the lower schools of tenet within Buddhism, who say that things should have some essence or independent existence and their own nature, because if they do not have that kind of called essence or self-existence, then how can you talk about the causes giving rise to effects and all the different workings of actions and their fruits and so forth? And so how can things have their identity as such? And therefore they criticize Madhyamaka, saying that you should not assert that things do not have any essence, their self-defined characteristics and so forth, but because things have their own identity, and the causes giving rise to their effect shows that there is something in the cause which can give rise to the effect, and therefore a cause, for example, has to have its own identity, and therefore if you do not accept that, then you would be going against what is obvious. Nothing can be posited if you deny this fact. And so to this, Master Nagarjuna gives the answer that when I say that things are empty of any intrinsic nature, intrinsic essence, I'm not denying the fact that the things do exist, but he gives the answer that to whom emptiness is feasible, everything else is feasible. And to whom emptiness is not feasible, and nothing is feasible. And so he says that when you accept emptiness, that things do not have any intrinsic nature as such, then you can actually still talk about how things work. The causes and conditions giving rise to the effects, and effects rising from their causes and conditions, and that things being dependent on something else. And all these things could still be well established. And then, having said that, he, as an answer to the lower schools of tenet, who say that saying things are empty, that the Madhyamaka are saying that nothing really exists, and Master Nagarjuna says that that is not the case. In fact, when what you are saying is that when you say that emptiness means nothingness, then you do not actually understand the purpose of teaching of emptiness, and you don't understand the nature of emptiness, and you do not understand the meaning of emptiness as well. And so with regard to these three, the purpose of emptiness is to destroy all kinds of objectification of things. Even if a slight sort of objectification of things is left, you still are left with this grasping at a true existence. And so if things have any kind of essence in themselves, that they have some kind of a self-defined characteristic in themselves, which is not dependent on others, then you will not be able to destroy this objectification of things. For example, in the case of the Chittamatrins, they say that, of course, there's nothing external. When they talk about the non-duality of subject and object, they do say that there's no externality of things, but then while saying that, they still hold on to the true existence of consciousness, the cognition itself as well. And so long as that kind of notion is there, that kind of apprehension or view is there, you are not able to destroy all the objectification of things completely. And therefore, when emptiness, the purpose of emptiness is to understand that there's nothing out there from the objects, side of the objects themselves, that exist independently. And so you have to see that nothing exists from their own side. And so that when you're able to understand that there's nothing that exists independently of any other factors, then you're able to destroy all objectification of things, unlike the Chittamatrins. And then with regard to the nature of emptiness, Nagarjuna says that it is this total pacification of all kinds of elaborations. Here, when someone destroys all the objectification of things, what happens is that even the objects like the vase and pillars and so forth, when you realize emptiness of them, that the object themselves also disappear from the view of that perception. And so that shows that of the pacification of all elaborations is the nature of emptiness. And then the meaning of emptiness, as Nagarjuna says very clearly in this chapter, in the 24th chapter, is what arises through dependence, that is explained to be empty. And which means that that things don't exist independently, and therefore this is itself is dependently designated, and this is the middle way.
Ninde tongdiyote, ninde sumye chadawate yorda. Chasanga, chana moni yutulu tongrede, tene tabe chökidate yorda. Naya midabuji ke yorda. Jismuduwa, sumye tongdiyo wate, chenye zowa tenadas. Toma bata targewa, luwa meje, tabayi. Di den di pechi po sa ten, chö tenpa sa ten di jane, Yana, Po Radenchana, Tempa Seta, Tempa to Yoya Tempa Che. Paji, Tempa Jane, Jinglu Sangi. Yana, Takanda, Toma Pata Tarkewa Sene, Tagibana, the Sajik Chug, that Ma Shade Sene, Kasachi Snoma in Bella Tony, Montuya. Teneya, any nearly to ya, then nearly Tamshiki one to ya, so do Toma Pata Tarkewa, Leguto. So that did Sanjay Luan Majing, Tambasman, Gyobaruchi, Machi, Taban Digital Kasa, Pegotata, Jombata, Tao again to Tomata, Tomwell Kasa, Pegotata, Tao again to Tomata, and Kasa. Gigu to you to Cheve, Lung the court, draw a pel, so on a shinky. The rig gone, Tempe Quachi, Lentotua. Yana Lua maybe, Gave Temba Tishin dus, and Da Mewang, Tonta Passum to catch her, Sajong. Cause you and she, almost never want to channel, Chanju Sim. Mikey Kungla, Dongi Dawe, Quacha, Dongi Dawa, never told. Dunga Zero in Baton, Chanju Saj water, Chanju Toru in Bashi. The Digatane, Chanju Dubani Chanju Simtia Jigtua. There's on the Maseve, Taba Tony Lokivale, Dongi Dawa Kotua. Dongi Dawe, Taba Yuvashi Qualigra. Shan Taba Sanjay Song, Yoy very Saj. And a Taba means them. Jigube in Duguyari, Chanjimbe in Duguyari, Teta Data, Tabandone, Shungshandai Pejita, because of Traditionai Yuguyari. In a Taban ward, Timachi to shoot the Nigata sometime day, Midua. So the ring is an Dunik Dawala then Taban Washi, Tabat washing the Tabat Tony Logia, the Yungro. Dunik Dawala then Maribo Washi. Marigo Bangbeta, Tabat Jumi, but she was always called. So, Duni Dawa the Dene, Tension the legs of Kujis of Lola, Kuata, Niggles our Doshiro. Kuji Dan Chisho, Uring our tension, she can be without our tension. Emo, Kevin, the need to carry Konto Street, what is a Ganga corner, the Chola Jishir Kumin Yusen, so on Nashingi, Dam to Taba 2 members, the time would do. Saturday in the Sane, or the day in Duta, Tony Dawa, the Tonga Paso Casable. This is on that matter. Consider that Dameba, Chidder Data Turkey Das. Chidder Soga Tusu Chu, Choshen Jebberchi, Tini Chan, Tusuni, Changoshen Jebberins. Da Dipel Gurney, Numo Chaya Yovana, Simjation Jebberins. Numo be Shawan to Jutenge, Numo Paja Shawan to Yodeba. You know what the tape was a Kurunga leve, that Castle Piggy, that Semden Sorry, then Digi, Senda Debatilla Semje. Tini, Numo Paja the Charge on a suggestion of Java Charles.
Verse number 33 shows that that things do not have, things do have some conventional existence, but if you logically analyze the things within themselves for their identity, then you will not be able to find them. So, in other words, it shows that of being free from the two extremes of nihilism and eternalism. And then, but things are dependently originated, they're interdependent. And then verse number 34 gives this analogy of the image or the reflection of sun, moon, and stars in the water within a container that is pure. Just so the characteristics are complete. And so what this in turn shows is that things, although when we say an image of our face in a mirror, for example, I mean, you will not say that image is your face as such, but then called reflection in this mirror, and reflection of the sun, moon, and your face, and in some called like in the container and so forth, and in the water and so forth, are said to be used as analogies to show that things are deceptive. Called untrue nature of things. And so although things do have existence by way of designation, called dependence through designation, they do not exist, they do not have their own essence, any independent existence as such. And therefore the verse number 34 shows that. And then verse 35 could be understood, the virtuous through the beginning, middle, and end could be understood in terms of the causes for higher rebirth, practicing the virtuous actions, the 10 virtuous actions, you're gaining the higher rebirth, and then understanding of the selflessness, reaching, through understanding of the selflessness, reaching liberation, and then through the understanding of the totality of emptiness, you gain the omniscient state as well. And so this could be defined in this way. And then the term undeceiving and steadiness here. So because of this possibility that things could be brought about, I mean, the results could be brought about through their causes, the teaching of the Buddha is not undeceiving, and it is so the term steadiness here could also be another word which is to refer to the teaching of the Buddha, the doctrine. Instead of say having having steadiness, we can also switch it with doctrine. And so the teaching of the Buddha showing in the path in this way is undeceiving, and that could be interpreted. So basically what that means is that the teaching on selflessness, through the understanding of selflessness or emptiness, those who are of sharper faculty are able to, even before entering into any of the path of accumulation of any of the vehicles, they do analysis of things and find that nothing is independently existing. Therefore, they don't have any selfhood, and therefore, through that understanding, they find that the certitude that called understanding of emptiness could lead to higher the liberation. Understanding of emptiness could lead to cessation, and that of omniscient state and so forth. So they, through reasoning, they are able to establish, even before entering into the path of accumulation and so forth, they are able to establish through reasoning and gain certitude in these possibilities. Of course, with regard to liberation, it is something which even the non-Buddhist traditions do talk about. But then we are here talking about the liberation in the sense that all the negative thoughts and emotions dissipating into or dissolving into the Dhammadhatu. And so for that you have to understand emptiness. And so through based on understanding of emptiness, you can prove liberation, the cessation, liberation, and then also those of the three refuges, that there is a possibility of attaining those things. And in this way, your faith, it could induce a very strong faith in the three jewels as well. And so in this way, the teaching of the Buddha is virtuous in the beginning, middle, and end.